Dear photography friends, Tomasz here from Frames magazine, and today I have a very special conversation for you. Mark Forbes, photographer from Australia, probably one of the most favorite photographers personally of mine, these days. Wonderful work, full of emotions, full of great observations, attention to details, very personal approach to the scenes, in front of his camera. I absolutely love his work. I was excited and happy to talk to Mark, about his work. So many different kinds of insights, ideas, and a very inspirational conversation, I would say. So I hope very much you will enjoy it. And let's dive straight into my conversation with Mark Forbes. Mark, good evening. So nice to have you here, on Frames. I have been following your work for a while now. It must be a few years at least. Really impressed, really loving your work, and the project, the series that really, kind of touched really my heart, my internal, emotional structure was affected, was the Collected Memories series.
Sure.
So I think we'll be concentrating, probably this is, I understand, the main series of yours these days you're working on. But first of all, thank you so much for joining me. How are you doing? How is Australia these days?
Thanks for having me on, Thomas. Really appreciate it. We did obviously have a few emails, so it's good to make a time to chat to you. But no, Australia's good. It's the evening now. It's 5:30ish, so it's we're in autumn, so it's getting a bit cooler. But it's all good over here. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, so let's talk about your photography. I mean, you have been doing different kinds of work. You have portraiture, right? You have you have traveled a lot, but the main focus, I guess the main series you are also presenting these days is Collected Memories. It's a series where you kind of explore the idea of capturing memories, but then also our photographs actually becoming those memories, because the original memories kind of fade out, or maybe we forget things, how they exactly looked. Yeah, tell me a little bit about how it all started. What was the initial trigger for this series? And just a little bit about the series. What's the underlying, thread and idea here?
Yeah, sure. I've been working on the series for, it was 5 years for the images in the series that made it into the book, because it's a book. I guess it really sort of came about. Initially, I didn't have the concept of a book in mind. It was just me sort of taking the photos in the fashion that I always try and take my own photos. And that's really a lot of organic sort of wandering, a lot of meandering around and finding places and discovering things and just being really very nosy and wanting to see what's, down an alleyway or what might be behind a closed door or, what's sort of going on around the corner, really, I suppose. So I do a lot of walking around, a lot of investigating, and I bring my cameras with me. And I'll stumble across these scenes in sort of everyday life. And that's really how the series started. And from there, I'd sort of been shooting it for about sort of 3 years, and I got the feeling that it felt like I wanted to compile it into a book, and it went from there. So that's really my general approach to photography in terms of that sort of genre is really organic investigation and searching for interesting moments in the everyday that people may just sort of not notice when they're going around about their time.
It's extremely interesting. I mean, in my exact case, it's very clear why I reacted to this, because I kind of practice and love this kind of photography. I also walk places, walk different, shady streets, react to old objects on the streets, some kind of, exactly. But what is it like if you would have tried to summarize or maybe, analyze the moments that trigger actually you to take the photograph, is there any common denominator when you look at those things? I mean, one thing that just, to a bit expand here, there is no people in your photographs, or at least not. I mean, occasionally there is somebody's silhouette or maybe but you don't photograph people. I'm talking about this series, right? So you are reacting to, objects, scenes. But is there a common denominator, something you would be able to put a finger on that inspires you to take those images?
Yeah, sure. It's funny you say about people, because if you go back before this series, I actually did do a lot of people-based street photography. So it was very heavily, for want of a better word, like decisive moment style photography, like, Cartier-Bresson type photography. Yeah. Not saying that's what it was, but that was the ilk of it. And I shot that for quite a while, and I really enjoyed it. And then I was sort of seeing it come up often and, social media and stuff, and I felt like I wanted to do something a little bit different. And I also, it's around about that time frame that I also switched back to shooting film, and that forced me to slow down a lot. And I think it just made me approach scenes in a different manner. So there was that sort of happening in the background. And then I have a real affinity for how people interact with the environment and a given sort of photographic scene, I guess. So I wanted to take photos of scenery or spaces that felt as if you could have a human connection there, but you didn't explicitly need a person in the frame to convey that sense of feeling and emotion of a person. So then I started playing along the lines of, I guess, like anthropomorphism and imbuing human aspects to objects. And so that was where my interest began. And therefore, to sort of go back to your first question, I guess what I'm looking for really is a scene that you can feel the human element. And what really draws me to taking a certain photo, I guess, will be a combination of the context of the scene, the colors and the geometry of the scene, and the light and the aspect of the given day. So there's all these sort of different combinations that come together in terms of what piques my interest at the beginning scene.
Yeah, and I can imagine it happens on, as I feel your images, it's happening very intuitively, I would say, on a very emotional basis. I mean, that's what I'm reading from the images.
Yeah.
But also what's interesting, you are mentioning the human element. So obviously, the photos were taken, maybe one this year, last year, right? So it's humans' interaction of today was there, was present in the scene before, or, But at the same time, maybe because of the fact that you are using exactly medium format film, the look of the images, it gives them this extremely nostalgic kind of feel and look. Very often, I would almost imagine that these are some kind of abandoned places, but actually they are not, because the human beings were there just a few minutes ago. Yeah, right? So I think you combined really a very fascinating, array of elements into creating those images. Is it something you thought about a lot, is it just your emotional response to how you see the world, basically?
It's really a gut instinct, I think. Yeah, I don't tend to think about them a lot when I'm identifying something that to me is interesting. I do tend to, certain scenes for me, if there's a very heavy element to geometry in them, then I will review what's in front of me on a bit of detail. But generally, most of the things, if it's very an emotional image, I don't tend to think about it. It's like, oh wow, look that over there. It really strikes me that I have to take the image. It's like I'm driven to take the image because it's a compulsion. Yeah. So there's two elements to it, I suppose. Most of the images are probably that aspect, but certain images I will be like, oh, the geometry. But it's almost, I don't think it's so much thinking. It's more visually, it just clicks. Like it's sort of like visually evaluating it. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, this particular project, so you are taking the images with a medium format film camera, right? That's correct? Okay. So I can imagine you are you don't walk with the camera, at all times. Is it planned sessions when you go for a look, essentially for images? I can imagine it's a big piece of equipment, right? Relatively big. It's not a pocket camera.
I thought you might ask me the question. So there's a bit of scale for it, and there's my head. So that's the one that I do most of my photography with. So a Rolleiflex. So this one's from 1965 or 1968, around about then. So that's the 6x6. And then the other camera I use, probably less so, but definitely a bit, is a Mamiya 7. So they are large-ish cameras, but they're not huge. So they're actually pretty compact. I usually walk around with a travel bag just with those two cameras. But I tend to photograph. I tend to quite bingy in terms of how I photograph. So I'll go out and photograph for like a day or 2 days or 3 days, and then I won't photograph for a week or two. And I'll go out and photograph again, yeah. But when I do that, I tend to have, I don't necessarily have, most of the photos come along the way where I'm going to somewhere else. So maybe in the book, maybe there's 4 or 5 photos that I specifically wait to the scene for. The rest of them are things that I found on the way going somewhere else. So for example, if I go out for a day of photography, I might have a train line that I'm going to go for a ride along, and I'll have the final destination. But along the way, I might get off 2 or 3 stations before that on purpose, and then I'll walk the last stations along the street because all the photos that I'm interested in will just happen to be there that I won't plan to go there. They'll just come along the way. So that's how I tend to operate. Like, I'm always driving along, I'm looking down a side street, where am I going? I'll go have a look down there because something's interesting. Or if I'm walking down the street, and I'll see a doorway or an alleyway, I'll go, I'll have a look down there. So it's always just happening as I'm going.
Okay. What is it? What do you think it's what are the elements that speak to the, because obviously your photography, is being respected, enjoyed by many people. What do you think are those elements that actually we viewers, react to the strongest? Are you aware of it, or, are you getting any feedback? For me personally, it's exactly this kind of nostalgic look. So it's kind of out of our times, but at the same time, I'm looking at modern elements, at, today's scenes and places. Are you getting some feedback? What is the thing that people react the most to?
I think there's different aspects to it. And for me, it comes down to a few things. I think the first one is that if I've got a photo of a chair or a photo of a laundromat or a photo of a laundry cart or something, they can feel a sense of understanding and commonality in what's being taken, right? So they can feel that the sense of humanness coming across in the chair or whatever it is. So they can feel the human aspect. I think there's also the aesthetic of it in terms of the colors or how just visually how they see it. So there's that aspect. And I think the third thing, which for me ties back to the first one, is that I've had people say quite a lot that when they look at my images, they feel a sense of deja vu, but they know they've never been to the place. They know they've never seen this before, but as soon as they see the photo, they feel like, oh, wait a minute, something's going on here, but they don't know what it is. So there's some sort of emotional connection, which again is sort of like...
Yeah, it's extremely fascinating because, like me, I actually have been to Melbourne once in my life, but it has been, 25 years ago or something like that. So I don't know those places, but I am experiencing a very similar feeling. Me, who doesn't know those places at all. It feels so familiar and so, somehow close.
Yeah.
And to me, when I look at your images, let's look at a few. I prepared 3 or 4 random images. Let's now hope the technology is us. I mean, I can always, edit it later. So let's see. Sure. I prepared a few images. So the idea would be, now I show you, don't know which images are coming. You react your own photos. You tell us a little bit, what you will remember about the scene, about the feeling you were getting there, and why you took this picture, right? Okay, let's start with this one.
Yeah, sure. So this one, I was in a restaurant with my wife, and we were having lunch, and as soon as we walked in the restaurant, I was really taken by the colors and the light, and it was amazing. And we were sitting right next to this table. We were sitting to the left of this table. And And the lady who was sitting next to us, who was sitting on her own, got up and walked away. And straight away, I had my camera back next to me, and I was like, I said to Cammy, I need to take a photo. I need to take it. She gets this all the time, my wife. She gets this all the time, so she knows what's going on. She's like, okay, you go take a photo. And as I sort of got my bag together, ready, the girl, the waitress came across to the table, and she was about to clear the table. And I said to her, do you mind if I take a photo? And she goes, yes. She goes, I'll clear the table for you. And I said, no, don't clear the table. I said, wait, I'll take the photo. She looked at me and she goes, I said, it's fine. Believe me, I just want to take that photo with the glasses and the cups. And she goes, okay, yeah, no worries. So the people in the restaurant were sort of watching me. And I was just again, the color combination between the blue and the pink and the feeling that the person had left, like literally 30 seconds before, and the cutlery. So, I mean, that's exactly what was going through my head. And I think that there's some of the other people in the restaurant thought it was very amusing, but for me, I knew there was a photo, and I was compelled.
It's just so beautiful. The image is so, what's the word? Humanistic. It's just, I feel like we have our meals every single day. We stand up, dirty dishes, and it's just this moment. Yeah, you capture those moments. So I connect on such a deep level. Now, can you tell us what film are you using, in the camera?
Yeah, sure. So, generally, or almost without, almost always, I'm shooting Kodak Portrait 400. In the book, I think every single image was Portrait 400 with the exception of one, which was shot on slide film, which was Fuji Pro. So, but at the moment, as for those images, it's pretty much always Portrait 400.
Okay. Let's take a look at another one. Now, before we dive into this one, it's obvious. I don't know if you know or you don't know, but I'm also a classical pianist.
Ah.
So I had to this is obvious why I reacted to this particular image. But okay, tell me the story here. What's this place?
Yeah. This one's actually, and it's funny you say you're a pianist, because that is a 1920s Steinway. So yeah, it's a good piano. And this one is quite interesting in the book because it's, I was actually commissioned to do a shoot in a very old historic mansion, just up the road from me as part of a gallery that commissioned me to do some work in there. So I actually did a portrait series in the gallery, with a ballerina. But going back to this, so I did the portrait series, and then I was able to access the really big, amazing historic mansion another weekend after I did the portrait series. And I was in there just shooting the house, shooting the spaces. And at the end of the session, I had one shot left on my roll, in my Rolleiflex. And I was looking around, and I hadn't taken this photo. And I was looking around, and I was like, I just wanted to shoot the shot so I could get the film off to get processed. And I walked up a passageway, and I turned back around as I was leaving, and this scene was like right behind me, and it hadn't sort of dawned on me the importance of it until I looked from that angle as I was walking back through the doorway, and just the way the light was there. But what it really was for me was the interesting orange and green cellophane in the top corner, and just how it made just a point of interest for what was otherwise just the rest of the scene was obviously about the light and the colors and the piano, but that for me just made it have that extra point of interest. So yeah, I took the image, and and obviously it was just something that was quite different to the other stuff that I photographed.
Yeah. Tell me a bit, you mentioned something very interesting, and many of our viewers who shoot on film will relate. So the idea of seeing potential in a particular frame, right? And knowing that you have, maybe one or two frames left on the roll of film. When compared to shooting digital, is it a process that really changed over the years? Or no, when you switched back to film and so on? I guess what I'm trying to ask is the level of confidence that this particular frame will make for a good photograph. Is it something that you had to work on? Is it something that you really, approach differently these days?
Yeah, I think so. I was shooting film back in like 2002, in 2003, 2004. And then I swapped across to digital around then. And then I didn't shoot film again until probably 2015, maybe 2014. And I'd been shooting a lot of the street photography with people on my digital cameras and stuff. And I then swapped back to shooting film. And I found as soon as I did that, I found my enjoyment level with what I was shooting just went up exponentially. And I found that was because I was shooting far fewer frames, obviously because it's more expensive and, you know, you don't have infrared film. And I found that as I shot less, my enjoyment went up. And I think that was because every time I took a frame, I was thinking a lot more about it. So it just became, it was almost like a little bit more of a challenge. And obviously it made me appreciate the time that you should take when you take a picture rather than just taking 5 or 10 photos of a given frame and, you know, moving around, just evaluating things a lot more. And also it harks back to the whole concept of the book in that it made me focus more on what I'm shooting because I can't see what's coming up on the back of the camera straight away. And it just made me more involved in the process of taking a photo, and therefore my enjoyment went up. So that's probably the main thing that I've found as I've shot film is I shoot less and I enjoy it more.
And the success ratio, is it, I can imagine, relatively high then, you know, of the final, you know, images that you then, you know, develop and look at, that you keep? Because you're more particular and you're more focused and more specific. I think definitely the success ratio is high. Okay, nice. Okay, let's have a look at one more image here. This one. What's the place?
This
was how car is covered, right?
Yeah. This is Melbourne, and I've driven past this. This is probably maybe 20 minutes, 25 minutes from my house. But I'd driven past it in the day, and I was like, it's quite interesting. I maybe took a photo or two, and then I thought to myself, this could really be an image that would work at night. So I went back there, set up my tripod, and I just love the way the lights are in the background, the detail in the tree, and the fact that obviously the car is the hero of the shot. And again, it feels like it's, you know, someone who's gone to bed or it's someone who's been there for a while. And just the whole quiet aspect of the night obviously has a very different vibe to what was going on during the day. The leaves on the ground. Yeah, so it's I know I've shot covered cars before. There's one or two other covered, and I just enjoy them because for me they feel, again, very humanistic. They've got a lot of personality to them, and you don't really know what the car is, so there's an interesting aspect from an intrigue perspective there. So yeah, I always enjoy finding scenes like.
Now, this particular image, is it a 6x6 or is it a square?
This is a rectangle, so it was shot on the Mamiya.
Is it? Because I noticed different ratio a bit, across the images, right?
Yeah. So in most, not all of the square images were shot on the Rolleiflex. All of the rectangles were on the Mamiya. But occasionally, if I find a Mamiya 6.7 shot that I think made work better in square format, then I will crop it down. But generally, I'll tend to keep to the aspect ratio of the camera because as I'm framing up, I'm using the frame lines or the TLR viewfinder to really maximize the view of what I want to take the image of here.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned this photograph, you use a tripod. Is majority of your images handheld?
Yes, they are. If I'm going, that's primarily because I like to walk around with as little gear as possible. I like to just have my camera bag and that's it, and some rolls of film. If I'm going at night or if I'm going into an interior that I know is going to be very dark, then I will have my tripod with me and I will obviously use it because you need to, but I'm pretty comfortable hand holding my cameras down to 1:30, maybe sometimes even 1:15, but obviously you're going to lose the depth of field because you're going to have to be a wider aperture. But But yeah, most of my shots are handheld. But if I know that I'm heading out for a given thing, then I'll bring one tripod with me.
Yeah. So, collected memories. You have a book now, right? How many images in the book? Tell us a bit about the book. And also, is this project now closed, or is it something ongoing you are going to continue, with for the years to come?
Yeah, sure. So I got on the desk next to me, so I'll quickly hold it up. So, so it's 57 images. It was photographed across 5 years. And, all medium format film, as I said before, so all portrait with the exception of the one image on Probiot. From my perspective, I guess the concept of how I shoot is the same. I'm still sort of taking the similar vein of images, and I probably will continue for a while. But the book itself is obviously, it's done, it's finished. I guess I tend to shoot and images just because of what I enjoy doing and in terms of what the topic matter is. So I tend to shoot, and then later on I'll compile them into a project. So I sort of work a little bit differently to people who go out with an intention to shoot a given project. I tend to sort of collect and then determine how they fit together. So I'm still working on similar images in terms of concept, but I may do something slightly differently going forward. We'll see how we go. But it's all right. If I see a given scene that would have otherwise been, as I would have shot previously, obviously I'm loving how I'm shooting, and I shoot for me. So yeah, I'm still going to take those sort of images.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, I will be linking, of course, to the book, the website in the description of this video. Just briefly, about, other projects, other interests. I see a couple of other series on your website. I love the one with I don't remember the name now, I'm sorry, of the, ballet dancer.
Yeah.
Beautiful project. I will share later some images on the screen. When was this shot?
So what I was talking before about the shot with the Steinway, so that was the commissioned shot, the shoot that I did with the ballet dancer. So that was shot in sort of March last year. Yeah, March 2023. And to give you a little bit of an idea of that, so the whole premise of the shoot was to try and capture the essence of the ballet dancer within this old historic mansion that it was given over by for the commissions for me to shoot. And I'd always wanted to work with a ballet dancer because for me, there's a whole sort of aspect to them in terms of hard work and dedication and, that persistence, I suppose, which I really appreciate that as a quality. So I really wanted to use, juxtapose the ballet dancer within the building, this amazing old historic building, which is really sort of crumbling down. And for me, the whole premise of using the ballet dancer was to show, capturing creativity and, breathing new life into this building and just how she would interact with scenes and spaces.
Oh, I love this project. Obviously, I'm also a bit more biased here because it's somewhere closer to music and, and art and stuff, but absolutely lovely images, the light and everything, in the frames. How do you feel, over all those years, and couple of projects, and now looking into the future, how do you think your own photography develops? Like, do you feel is something new on the horizon that you are already trying, or thinking of pursuing, maybe in terms of a different project, different maybe technology, look, and so on?
I think I've done a lot of experimentation up until a few years ago in terms of working with things like different aspect ratios, different cameras. Like I've shot a lot of 35mm, then I shot some panoramics. And then I sort of settled on shooting between the 6.6 and 6.7. So I think in terms of how I like to approach a scene, I think my framing and my references, I've sort of done a lot of experimentation to get to where I am now. In terms of content, I think I would like to probably work to do more portraiture, and more setup portraiture and that sort of thing. But obviously continuing to photograph the scenes and that would otherwise, be the things that I've shot up till this point. So I'm still interested in those as a backdrop, but potentially maybe moving to work in terms of then from a environmental portraiture perspective, but I'll still continue to.
Yeah. And what about, so the collected memories project is, as I understand, you are shooting it mainly, within a radius of, like you mentioned, maybe 20 kilometers. So I don't know. It's around the place you live, right?
It's not completely. So probably 60% is Australia. But there's also definitely some travel and work in there. So there's some America, there's some Italy, and there's a little bit of England in there as well. But the majority of the images are from Australia.
Yeah. Because I also noticed on your website you have visited Italy, right? You have been to Europe and so on. Shooting at home versus shooting, in foreign exotic locations. How do you need both? We often struggle, right? We end up in those phases where we don't see anything, on our own streets. Whereas in the back of our minds, we know there is much. There is great photographs everywhere. And how does it work for you? Do you need both of those worlds?
I think yes. I think you especially in terms of the sort of things I'm photographing, because I'm looking for a given scene or a space. You know when you've shot things in certain areas, so you have to keep going further and further and further and traveling further. So I think, which is fun, and I always do that. Or if I go for a longer drive, then obviously I've got my gear with me and just see what I can find. But then I tend to, in terms of travel, I'm always thinking of where would be interesting and where I would like to go, and obviously determining what would be an interesting path to travel through a given place when I'm there. But again, most of the things will just come up on the way when you're traveling. So you can plan a little bit, but you can only plan so much. So,
have you been to Switzerland?
A long time ago, but not with my camera.
Okay, this will be an interesting place, and I'm sure you would be able to create some amazing shots here, because I'm based in Switzerland, right? So people often consider Switzerland an extremely challenging place to photograph because it's so tidy and organized and boring. But looking at your work, I am absolutely sure you would be, able to produce some amazing shots just within, 50 meters from where I am sitting right now. So one day it would be great to see you here,
Yeah. It's funny as well, because one of the things that I enjoy about photographing is taking a scene that people go past all the time but don't pay any attention to, and then you show them a photo of it and you're like, oh, and they're like, wow, I didn't sort of appreciate that. So I find it challenging and enjoyable to sort of try and find those sort of places. Look at them from a different angle. Yeah.
Love it, absolutely love it, because I'm kind of like, sharing the approach but the results are way more interesting on your side. So much work to be done here. But Mark, thank you so much. So fascinating. I absolutely love the work. We stay in touch. We will be, following all your projects. I'll be linking to everything. What's next? Do you have anything, particular coming up? Any kind of travel project?
Yeah. So the next thing I'm working on, in September, October timeframe is I've got a solo exhibition in Korea, in Seoul, in Korea. So I'm going to be there exhibiting for about a month. So I'm going to plan some travel around that. So at the moment, I'm working with the gallery to figure out what's going to be exhibited, some from the book, some not from the book, and just go from that. So that's probably the next thing. And I'm obviously going to travel a little bit around as well. So that's the next thing I'm sort of putting my planning and thinking onto.
Yeah. Let me just jump in here, because it's extremely exciting. Another bit of info for some of you maybe who don't know it, and including yourself. So my wife is Korean, and we will be most probably in September in Seoul. Okay. So let's check our calendars later. This can be crazy. I mean, the same spirit.
Right.
Yeah. Mark, thank you so much. Yeah. Have a great evening, right? And we stay in touch. One day in the magazine, hopefully, would be amazing.
Absolutely. Thanks for letting me be part of this, Thomas. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thanks, mate.